Hello and welcome to Australian Mountain Bike Magazine's How To Volume Number 2, proudly presented by Clarence Street Cyclery, Trek Bicycles and Bontrager. I'm Chris Southwood.
And I'm Mick Ross, and we're going to demonstrate some techniques to help you riding, no matter what style of mountain biking you're into.
We had some great feedback on the first edition of our How To series, so in this, Volume 2, we're going to be expanding upon some of those skills, as well as introducing some more advanced techniques. Now don't worry if you didn't see the first volume, because we're going to start out by recapping some of those basics and fundamentals. By getting out of the saddle and riding in the neutral body position, you've got the best chance of reacting to whatever the trail throws at you. You can move your body weight around and you can use your arms and legs as suspension to soak up the terrain. On technical terrain like this, it's vital that you remember your neutral body position. You need to be up out of the saddle with your pedals level so you're not going to clip them on the ground below you, keeping your arms and legs nice and loose and relaxed, letting that bike move around underneath your body. As you get tired, it's very important to avoid that urge to sit down. If you start doing that and locking your limbs, trying to give them a rest, you're going to find that your bike gets hung up on all the rocks and you lose momentum, giving you a choppy ride. That's not what you want. On this kind of terrain, holding momentum is key. If you're moving slowly, the bike's going to fall into all those holes and you're going to lose momentum and it's going to give you a choppy ride. If you can get up to a bit more speed, you'll find you skim across the top of those bumps more. But as you get faster, you need to remember to lift your vision up and look further down the trail because things are going to be coming at you more quickly. Cover your brakes, of course, so you're always ready if there's something you need to stop for, but avoid touching them if you can. Although your fundamental neutral body position involves riding with your preferred foot forward, it's good to get used to switching them around and putting your preferred foot at the back. This way, if you ever get caught out on the trail, you're not going to be in a panic situation and you're going to be able to handle the bike properly. So the key things that you want to remember for your neutral body position are get up out of the saddle, keep your pedals level, arms and legs slightly bent, look ahead down the trail and cover those brakes with one finger. Now we're going to quickly look at braking fundamentals. Now the first thing you want to think about with your brakes is the actual physical setup of your brakes. Ideally you want to have your brakes set up so that when you put your hand on the grip and extend your index finger, it sits right in the crook of that lever. That way you've got the most mechanical advantage over the brake and you're making it work for you. You're going to get the most power out of it. The second thing you want to think about is the angle that the brake lever sits on in relation to the bar. Ideally, when you're in your neutral riding position, you want to be able to extend your fingers straight out and your brake lever should rest right underneath your fingers. You want that angle to be nice and natural, following your arm straight down to your brake levers. If you have them too far up, you're going to put pressure on your wrists, too far down, and you're going to do the same, which is just going to lead to fatigued and sore hands on long descents. Now up to 70% of your braking power comes from your front brake, so make sure that you're not afraid to go hard on that front brake and don't rely too much on your rear brake. As you're going to see, just using your rear brake takes a hell of a lot longer to stop. Try to avoid skidding. Your brakes aren't actually very effective when your wheel is locked up. You're best trying to keep your wheels rolling. Your brakes are at their most effective right on that point before you lock your wheels. When you're hard on the brakes, your body weight wants to get pitched forward over the front of the bike. So what you need to do is counter this with your body position. When you jump on those brakes, try dropping your hips back and down a little bit behind your saddle, push the bars forward slightly away from you, and if you're on a steep descent, try dropping your heels too. This will give you a nice firm brace to work against. It also keeps more weight on that rear wheel, which lets you brake harder with the rear without skidding.
Hey, Grandma.
Cornering isn't something that you're going to master overnight. It's simply too tricky. There are too many variables associated with it, but there are a few basic pointers that you should keep in mind. The first is to try and get all your braking done before you get into the corner. The second is your vision. You want to be looking through the corner the whole time. The third is to lean the bike. There's no point in just turning the bars. You need to actually lean the bike as well. And the fourth is to do with your pedal position. You want to drop your outside pedal. This puts more weight on the inside edges of your tyre and increases the clearance between the ground and your pedals. Riding sand is a tricky business. It can be very hard if you don't carry enough momentum and you don't have the right technique. But there are a few simple tips that'll help you get through the sand easily. The first is hit the sand fast. You want to carry as much momentum as you possibly can into the sand. So if you've got a good clear run into the sand, make up some speed and get ready. As you're about to hit the sand, you need to shift your body weight back. You don't want to have too much weight on your front wheel, otherwise it'll bite and dig in and could pitch you over the bars. The other thing that you want to remember is that your bike's going to have a bit of a mind of its own. Don't fight it, try and stay loose and relaxed. You want to have very soft hands on the grips, look where you want to go, and don't try and put any hard steering inputs. More guide and feel the bike the way through the sand. To get through deep sand successfully, you need to have a different pedaling technique to anywhere else. You want to try and apply power nice and gradually. You want to select a gear that allows you to put down the power nice and smoothly, because if you start going too hard on that gear, your wheel's going to dig in and you're going to bite hard into the sand and you're going to come to a complete stop. So try and have a nice slow cadence and remember to apply that force gradually with your weight on the rear wheel rather than on the front. Bike setup can also come into the equation. If you ride trails that have a lot of sand, you might want to try running a wider tyre with a bigger footprint. Also try letting a little bit more pressure out of your tyres, and that way your tyre will be able to conform and have a bigger contact patch, which will help you float over the sand rather than dig in. The key thing then to remember when riding sand is 1. Carry as much momentum as possible into the sand. 2. Have your weight on the rear wheel rather than the front. 3. Feel and guide the bike through the sand rather than steering it. And 4. Have a nice smooth pedal stroke so your rear wheel doesn't dig in. Now a berm or bank turn is very different to a flat turn. Because you've got a bank there, you can hit it with a hell of a lot more speed than you can with a flat turn, and in some cases you can actually come out of the berm faster than when you went into it. Now compared to a flat turn where you have to work much harder to try and maintain traction, it's quite easy in a berm because it's almost like riding a flat trail but turned on the side. As you power through the berm, the G-forces help you to maintain traction. Unlike a flat turn where often only your side knobs of your tyre are in contact with the dirt, on a berm, because of the way it's angled, you actually have maximum contact area the whole way through the turn. In regards to your body position, it's quite different to a flat turn. You actually want to maintain that neutral stance the whole way through the corner. You want to have your pedals level and keep your shoulders nice and square. And then you just want to make sure you keep your head level with the horizon the whole way through the turn as you lean through. You also want to try and really commit to the berm. You don't want to be taking 2 bites at it. You want to carve one continuous arc through it to get the maximum benefit. Now a berm is no different in that you want to try and get all your braking done before you enter the berm, and also you want to make sure you're looking through the berm the whole way as you would with a flat turn. If you keep looking through the berm, your bike's going to keep carving that nice clean arc. You'll also find with the berm that as you move through it and you get really compressed at the end from the G-forces, your bike will get preloaded and you'll spring out and you'll know that you've hit it properly. You'll get that nice acceleration, that pop out of the corner. Now cutties are quite an advanced technique, but they're something that you should still try and learn to do. Basically, it involves getting your bike into a short, deliberate drift without using your brakes. They're really useful for getting yourself through tight turns at high speed where you normally have to lean the bike, which could lead to a washout. So what you need to do, as you come into the corner, is unweight the rear wheel. You want to get your weight forward over the front and then thrust your hips through the corner, and this will get the rear wheel sliding. You want to do it with your pedals level as opposed to most corners when you might drop your outside foot, and it'll help get you through that corner nice and quickly, allowing you to carry heaps of speed. At the start of this DVD, we already introduced the basic cornering concepts, and we've also looked at berms, but now we're going to talk specifically about tackling a flat turn. Flat turns are probably the hardest turn to master because you really have to make the bike work for you in order to get maximum traction around the corner. Good flat turn technique begins before the corner, at the entry. Now you need to get all of your braking done before the corner where possible. We stressed this earlier on, but a tyre that is free rolling rather than one that is under brakes is going to have bags more traction, allowing you to get through the corner. The other thing you need to think about is your entry point. Getting out nice and wide at the start of the turn will open up the corner and give you a more gradual arc, giving you more control, allowing you to carry more speed and have more traction through the corner. Now that you're in the turn, there are three things you need to think about. The first is dropping your outside pedal. As soon as you drop that outside pedal, most of your weight gets transferred to that foot, which in turn gives you lots of leverage over the side knobs of your tyres, helping them bite hard into the ground. The second thing is leaning the bike. Don't be afraid to really tip that bike in. Getting your inside knee out of the way also will help you with that lean of the bike. The third thing is forcing your vision through the corner. We've said it before, but your bike goes where you're looking. If you've got your eyes firmly focused on the exit of the corner, it's really going to help you carve a nice, clean arc through that corner. Maintaining traction through a flat turn is something that is hard to master, especially if the surface is loose. In general, you want your body weight to be centered between the two wheels, but if the surface is especially loose, sometimes putting more weight on the front wheel can be the answer. This way you'll keep that front tyre biting, and if you are going to break traction, it's more likely to be your rear wheel than your front, which is easier to control. Leaning the bike is something that you have to get comfortable with doing. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, and people will sometimes want to keep their body in line with the bike as they tip it in. This doesn't work in a flat turn. In a berm, that's okay, but in a flat turn, you need to keep your weight above your wheels as the bike is leant. This means that you need to open up your stance, allowing the bike to tip over underneath you, but your body needs to stay in a nice, clean, vertical line above the bike. If your body is above the bike rather than in line with the bike, you're going to have more weight above your tyres, which means in turn, more traction. If you're having trouble leaning the bike, really concentrate on opening up your stance. Get that inside knee out of the way and try really pulling the bike over with your hands. Use your outside hand and move it across your body, and this will help get the bike leant over. In terms of your body weight distribution over the bike, most of your weight will remain on your outside pedal through the corner, but your hands are a little different. As you begin the corner, you'll have more weight on your inside hand. This helps initiate the turn. But once you've got that desired lean angle, try and keep even weighting over both hands. Your hips and your upper body also have a large bearing over how your bike will behave in the corner. Try and orient your hips through the corner. One good tip is to imagine that you've got a flashlight coming out of your belly button. Try and aim that beam through the corner where you want to go. As you can see with flat turns, there are a lot of things to think about, from your entry point, your braking, your weight distribution, your body position and your vision, and more. There are so many things that you have to keep in the front of your mind. It makes it a very hard area of your riding to master. But if you do get it right, you can really minimize the effort that it takes to get through a trail, because you're spending less time braking and accelerating and more time flowing on through and conserving that energy. Loose, steep fire road climbs seem to be part of every trail network. There are three main techniques to keep in mind when you're tackling a loose climb like this. First of these is body position. Your body position on a climb like this is all about finding that right balance between stopping your front wheel from lifting but maintaining enough traction on your rear wheel. The steeper the climb, the closer you're going to have your chest to the stem and your elbows tucked in, keeping that front wheel from lifting. But at the same time as you do this, this can cause the rear wheel to spin. So it's a constant process of readjusting that balance. You need to really concentrate on a smooth power delivery. A choppy pedal stroke on a climb like this is likely to lead to a breaking of traction at the rear wheel and a loss of momentum. You also need to really concentrate on getting the hang of riding in a higher gear if possible. A higher gear is great on this kind of climb because if your rear wheel does break traction, you're not likely to slip as far with your pedals, whereas in a lower gear, you're going to spin out completely. This kind of terrain often begs the question, are you better to stay in the saddle or get out of the saddle as you climb? Now your best option is actually to hover slightly above the saddle. This way you've still got a low center of gravity because your body mass is still low above the bike, but you're able to move around freely and react, so you can make those quick subtle weight changes as you need to, and the bike can still absorb the terrain and keep traction as you climb. Often when people come over the top of a climb, the first thing they do is sit down and actually have to click down to an easier gear. Try to power over the top of the climb. That way you're going to carry good speed up the climb and all that hard work that you've just put in isn't going to go to waste. This next section deals with a whole bunch of techniques for helping you get up rock steps and ledges and small sharp rises. Now a small rise like this one could be conquered by simply riding at it with a lot of momentum and muscling the bike up it, but this is the hard way of doing things. The easier technique is to wheelie into the face of it. Compared to simply riding into the face of this rise, wheeling allows your front wheel to miss the steepest part of the transition, and thereby you can carry more momentum because it's a smoother ride up. The technique is actually quite easy, but first of all you need to select a gear that is low enough that you can easily pop the front wheel. If you're in too hard a gear, you're not going to be able to get the correct wheelie. Have your non-preferred foot forward, and as you approach the transition, bring your preferred foot forward at the same time as giving a tug back on the bars and putting your hips back, and this will loft your front wheel. As soon as your front wheel touches down, take your hips forward and drag that rear wheel up behind you, and as soon as you feel that rear wheel reach the top of the transition, start putting on the power. It's very important that you don't freak out and grab your brakes. If you feel like you're stalling out, the best thing to do is simply try and power out of it. As soon as you grab your brakes, you're going to stall out and you could topple backwards.
Come on, jump in, honey. Get your feet wet, honey. There's nothing quite like it. Just yourself and try it. Get your feet wet, get your feet wet, get your feet wet, get your feet wet, get your feet wet.
The next technique which we're going to show you is for dealing with ledges that you can't simply ride up. In this scenario, you need to actually lift the bike. Now there are a couple of different variants that we're going to show you. The first of these is for when you're traveling faster. In this scenario, you need to loft the front wheel of the bike. Now this is done by snapping your hips towards the rear of the bike at the same time as giving a tug back on the bars. As soon as you feel your front wheel touch down on the top of the ledge, you need to really throw your weight forward and scoop that rear wheel up behind you. You'll find, because you're pivoting off your front wheel, which is up on the ledge, it's not that hard to actually scoop the rear wheel up, rotating around that front axle. However, if you do find that your rear wheel doesn't come up high enough and it tags the ledge, don't panic. Don't grab your brakes, put in a half pedal stroke and try and power through it. If you grab your brakes, you risk stalling out and falling back off the ledge. The second technique which we're going to show you is for when you're traveling at slower speeds. If you're not going sufficiently fast that you can simply loft the front wheel, you need to put in a wheelie. This lofts the front wheel at the same time as generating momentum. What you need to do is approach the ledge with your non-preferred foot forward. Now to perform the wheelie, snap that preferred foot back round to the front at the same time as giving a tug back on the bars. This will not only loft the front wheel, but also give you some forward drive. You need to make sure you're in a gear that isn't too low or too high. Too low and you're just going to loop out off the back of the bike. Too high and the front wheel isn't going to come up properly and it's going to drive you into the ledge without your front wheel getting proper loft. As soon as you feel your front wheel touch down, throw your weight forward. Thrust your hips towards your bars and scoop that rear wheel up behind you. Once again, if your rear wheel doesn't quite make it up the ledge, don't panic and grab your brakes. You're far better off putting down some power and trying to generate momentum and keep going up that ledge. If you grab your brakes, you're likely to topple off backwards. This technique has plenty of potential for damaging your bike if you don't get it right. It's easy to smash your chain rings into the rocks. For this reason, we'd advise that you start small. Make sure you're comfortable putting in those half pedal stroke wheelies and you've got your timing right before you move on to ledges such as these.
Too high. I see your dressings and I gave you my heart. Slow down, you're moving too fast. I have answers for the questions you ask. Oh baby, I'm ready. You're really gone. Pick up the phone.
The next skill that we're going to talk about is how to tackle drop-offs like this. Now, the mechanics of doing a drop are exactly the same, whether it's a little 1-footer or if it's a big one like this. We've chosen quite a big drop for this demonstration because it really accentuates the body language that you have to use and makes it easier to see. Doing drops can be pretty dangerous, so before you go launching yourself off anything this size, you really need to work up to it from something nice and small. So if you've come across a drop on a trail and you've decided it's within your abilities to tackle it, first thing you want to do is check the landing. Make sure there are any obstacles that you have to clear, that you're going to have enough speed to clear them, and make sure the landing is a safe one. The next thing you need to work out is your run-in speed. You don't want to be doing any braking or pedaling at the last minute on a drop, because if you do, you're likely to throw off your balance and you could put yourself in a whole world of hurt. Now, the most important part when tackling a drop is leaving the takeoff. A lot of people have the wrong idea, and what they do is when they get to the edges, they heave back up on the bars and they actually make the drop bigger that way. They loft the front wheel and they throw the center of balance all off, and they end up having a terribly hard landing if they make the landing at all. What you really need to do is actually transfer your weight back as your front wheel is about to leave the edge, and that way you're preventing your front wheel from just dropping as soon as it leaves the takeoff. The idea is that as you leave the takeoff, both wheels should be level in the air, so you want your rear wheel and your front wheel to be level as you leave the takeoff. Now, the way that you stop your front wheel from dropping as you leave the edge is with a rearward transfer of weight. You want to drop your hips back and down, almost as if you're assuming that sort of braking position, and extend your arms away from you. As soon as you've left the takeoff, you want to start spotting your landing, so you're ready for that landing, ready to soak it all up as soon as you touch down. You also want to move your body weight back to the center of the bike, back to that neutral position. Extend your arms and legs so they're ready to soak up that impact, and you also need to start angling your wheels so they have the same angle as the landing you're trying to hit. You want to make sure that you land with both wheels at the same time. Front and rear should touch down together. As soon as you touch down, you want to let your bike soak up the impact, and as it does so, you also need to let your body soak up that impact. So really use your arms and your legs. Let the bike come up to meet you and compress down into the bike, absorbing as much of that energy as you can with your body, not just letting it all get soaked up by your suspension. That way you can have the smoothest possible landing and you can have the best chance of rolling out of it cleanly. Now, if you're feeling like you're not about to have a clean landing, you've come off the lip and something's gone a little bit wrong, you might have come off a bit crooked or something, you really don't want to panic. The worst thing you can do is take your foot off the pedal or start to stiffen up. You want to stay as loose as you can and still try and soak up that landing. Even if you skid off a bit to the side, you're probably not going to crash. The two most common errors that you see when people are tackling a drop are: one, hopping off the drop, as in lifting front and rear wheels as they come off the edge of the drop at the same time with a bunny hop. And this is dangerous because it risks you throwing your balance off to the side as well as adding height to the drop, which is going to make you have a harder landing. The second most common error that you see when people are tackling drops is landing with their rear wheel first. Now, this is quite a specialist technique that sometimes you'll see trials riders use, but it's not what you want to do for general trail riding. You want to try and land with both wheels at exactly the same time. This gives you the most ability to soak up the landing with both your suspension and your arms and legs. It also means you don't slap your front wheel down hard, which can be very damaging for your bike. In general, you want to avoid taking on drops that have a flat landing if they're more than a few feet high. Flat landings tend to be very harsh on your bike and your body, whereas drops that have a transition landing or a downslope are able to convert that downward force into forward momentum, giving you a much smoother landing. Descending steep ledges is something that a lot of riders find challenging and daunting. There's always a lot of potential for going over the bars unless your technique is correct. Now, to descend steep ledges such as these, you need to firstly have your speed under control. You don't want to come barreling into them too fast. By the same token, you don't want to be creeping and risk losing your balance at the last minute. It's all about body position. As your front wheel approaches the edge of the ledge, you need to bend your arms and get your chest nice and low to the stem. As soon as the front wheel starts to go over the edge, let your arms go with it. Extend your arms out. This will prevent that jerking motion that so many people experience as their front wheel drops over the edge. You also need to concentrate on having your hips back and low behind your saddle so your weight is nice and rearward on the bike so you don't get pitched over the front. You don't want to lock your arms. If you do, you're in for a rough ride as soon as your wheel hits the bottom of the transition. Now, as soon as your front wheel starts to kick out and begin rolling forward, absorb the impact with your arms. Soak that up. you also at the same time need to move your body weight back to the center of the bike. If you continue to ride with your weight off the rear of the bike, you're going to find that your front wheel will lift up in the air and you're going to do a wheelie by accident. Pumping is a great technique to have in the bag because it allows you to make the terrain work for you to gain speed. Essentially what you're doing is exerting force through the bike, forcing it into the ground in order to gain speed. Now the best place to come and practice this technique is your local BMX track. The technique itself is pretty simple. You need to concentrate on unweighting the bike. As it comes up the face of each rise, absorb the bike up into your body. With relaxed arms and legs, let it come up to meet you. And as soon as you feel that front wheel crest the rise and begin traveling down the back slope, push it down with your arms into the ground. As soon as you feel the rear wheel come over the rise, do the same with your legs. You really need to force that bike into the ground with your whole body. Don't just use your arms or your legs or you're only going to get half the benefit. If you're doing the technique correctly, you should be able to pick speed up, and by the time you exit the rhythm section, you should be traveling much faster than when you entered it. Although you're never going to find something just like the BMX track out on the trail, the technique can be applied to all kinds of areas of your riding. You can use pumping to gain speed out of the backside of water bars, through gullies, and even out of the landings of drops and gaps. In fact, just about anywhere where there's a downslope or a transition, you can use the pumping technique to gain speed. Don't be intimidated by the natural environment. Although it isn't as consistent as you might have at the BMX track, try and visualize it in the same way. You want to look at takeoffs and landings, compressions that you can manual through. Just try and play with the trail too. Don't ride the same line every time. Look at different options that you might be able to incorporate and try out all those different techniques wherever you can. Manuals are another great skill that you can come and practice at your local BMX track. Like pumping, they're an excellent way for generating speed out of the terrain. Manuals can be used all over the place on the trails. Anywhere there's a compression in the terrain is a perfect place to try out a manual. They're not just something that you can use as a practical skill for generating speed, they're a lot of fun for playing with the trail too. The technique is quite simple. As your front wheel approaches the edge of the compression, you need to snap your hips back, transfer your weight towards the rear of the bike, and extend your arms away from you. This will loft the front wheel of the bike. Now, at the same time, you need to push your legs down and away from you into the compression, and this is what generates your speed. As soon as your front wheel reaches the other side of the compression, pop it back down and pump down the backside of whatever it is that you're manualing into. This way you'll carry great speed out of the manual. When performing a manual, it's vital that you cover your rear brake with one finger. This way, if you loop out and go off the back of the bike, you can quickly dab that rear brake, which will instantly bring your front wheel back down and saving you from falling on your butt. Your side-to-side balance is another aspect that you need to consider with the manual, especially if you're trying to manual through a long compression. Use your hips to correct any balance from side to side, and a slight turn on your bars is all you need to get that bike travelling back up straight and narrow. There are a couple of areas on the trail where manuals can be very useful. One of these is if you have a double jump that you don't want to commit to having to jump, or if you don't think you have enough speed for. Instead of jumping it, you can pull a manual through the compression between the takeoff and the landing. This way you're still able to carry good speed, but without having to commit to actually jumping it. Jumping is a skill that comes very naturally to some people, but for others it's a bit of a struggle. Now once again, the BMX track is the perfect place to come and practice jumping. The jumps here are generally wide, consistent and smooth, and often there's a nice big tabletop, which is perfect for learning on. Before you begin, it's important to have a quick look at your bike setup. You want to make sure your saddle isn't too high, get it down nice and low out of the way. You also want to look at your rebound speed on your rear suspension if you're riding a dually. Slow it down. If it's too fast, you're likely to get bucked over the front of the bike, which is a pretty common problem. The ideal jump to learn on is a tabletop. This way you can build up nice and slowly. It doesn't matter if you don't make it to the down ramp to start off with. The first thing you need to consider is your speed. You don't want to be doing any braking or pedaling at the last minute. You want to have all your speed adjustments done well in advance so they're not going to throw you as you approach the jump. You want to be in a nice, relaxed, neutral body position. Your pedals should be level, you should be looking ahead, your arms and legs slightly bent and nice and relaxed. You want to get all your braking and pedaling done nice and early. You don't want to be making any last minute adjustments to your speed. The next step is to preload the bike. Preloading the bike is very important. As the bike approaches the face of the jump, crouch down slightly, compress your bike suspension and your body, bend your arms and legs and lower yourself slightly into the bike. As the bike begins to travel up the face of the jump, you re-extend from this position back to your neutral body position. In doing this, you actually push the bike lightly into the face of the jump, and this is what gives you that pop to carry over the jump. You need to make sure you stay relaxed and smooth. Any stiffness at this point is going to magnify any problems of being off balance or taking the wrong line off the lip. As you leave the lip and go into the air, there are a few things you need to consider. Firstly, your bike's going to have a very high front end position. You need to level off the flight of that bike as soon as possible. You do this by rotating your wrists away from you and moving your hips back slightly, returning your body weight to the center of the bike. You don't want to start focusing on your landing too early. If you do that, you're likely to propel the bike into a forward rotation, which can shoot you over the bars. Once the bike is back to level flight, you want to re-extend your arms and legs in preparation for soaking up that landing. Now you want to spot your landing too. This way you're going to be able to gauge whether or not you're going to be going too long or too short and start to make preparations accordingly. If you're going to come up short, you want to be ready to suck up that landing as much as possible. As you approach the landing, you want to adjust the angle of your bike's flight so that the front and rear wheels are going to touch down at the same time. You want to use your arms and legs to soak up the landing as well. Don't just rely on your bike's suspension. If you do rely too much on your bike's suspension and don't use your arms and legs to soak up the landing, you're likely to run into problems and get pinballed off course, as your bike will magnify any effects of landing slightly off center. If you're not confident that you're going to be able to make it to the landing of the jump on the first try, build up to it slowly. This way you get that feeling of preloading the bike, extending your arms and legs into the takeoff and getting that nice level flight. Slowly work up till you can make that landing. One of the most common problems that people have when jumping is a front wheel heavy landing. People get pitched forward over the front of the bike in the air. Now this happens because people just simply try and ride through the lip. They suck up the lip with their arms, but they don't do the same with their legs. Sucking up the lip is fine, but you have to remember to do it with both your arms and your legs. If you simply just suck it up with your arms but keep stiff legs, you're going to get propelled forward. Another common mistake is lifting the bike. Rather than using that preload and extension through the takeoff to generate lift, a lot of people simply ride off the lip and then hoik the bike up underneath them. This is not the way to do things. You've got far more chance of getting thrown to the side if you do this, and you're pretty much ensuring that you're going to have a really heavy landing. Up next is how to deal with a water bar on a fire road descent. Now we're going to show you 3 different techniques. The first of these is to squish the water bar, the second is manualing into the face of the water bar, and the third is pre-jumping into the water bar. Now these techniques are all used for different scenarios and different speeds at which you might be travelling. The first technique is squashing the water bar. This is perfect for when you're travelling at a moderate speed and you don't want to get launched by the water bar. What you need to do is make sure you're in that nice neutral body position and your arms and legs are nice and relaxed. As soon as you hit the water bar, allow the bike to be absorbed up into your body. Stay nice and loose and let the bike rise up to meet you. And once you get over the crest of the water bar, push down hard. Pump down the backside of the water bar, and this ensures you're going to stay on the ground and not get flung into the air whilst letting you carry good speed. The second technique is slightly more advanced, and this is manualing into the face of the water bar. This technique is perfect for when you're approaching a water bar on a steep descent where it's going to be hard to pre-jump and you don't want to squash it because you might get flung over the bars. Now, to manual into the face of the water bar, simply pull a manual, as we've taught you in some of the earlier techniques, straight into the face of it. But once your front wheel crests the water bar, push down hard on the backside. Make sure that you keep those wheels in contact with the whole backside of the water bar. This way you're going to stay on the ground and not get flung into the air while still being able to carry good speed. The third technique is to pre-jump the water bar, and this is a perfect option for when you want to carry maximum speed and squishing or manualing the water bar isn't an option. Now what you need to do is perform a big monohop before the water bar. Obviously the height and distance of this monohop is going to vary with the height of the water bar and the speed at which you're travelling, so you're going to need to practice. What you're aiming to do is to perform a monohop that's big enough that you're going to land on the back side of the water bar. You don't want to be landing on the top or the front of the water bar, obviously. Now, as soon as you land, push down hard and pump the bike down the downslope. This is the safest way to do it, and it's going to help keep those wheels on the ground and stop you from getting bucked over the front. There are plenty of obstacles that you'll come across on the trail which are so tall that you can't simply ride across them without catching your chain rings. We're going to show you a bunch of different techniques now for conquering those obstacles at different speeds. The easiest and probably the most common way for getting over obstacles that are too tall for simply being ridden across is to loft your front wheel onto it and then pick your rear wheel up. This is a really good technique. Simply riding into it with your front wheel lofted and letting your rear wheel plow into it is going to rob you of momentum and you might stall out. So what you need to do is loft that front wheel, pick it up, and as soon as you feel it touch down on top of the obstacle, pick that rear wheel up, much like we explained in climbing ledges before. Make sure you throw your weight forward. Transferring your weight forward to your front wheel will unweight the rear and allow it to smoothly roll over the obstacle. If you're travelling too slowly to simply loft your front wheel, say you've had a tricky corner or obstacles before the one that you're about to ride over, you might need to try and put in a half pedal stroke wheelie, again like we explained when we were talking about climbing ledges. Make sure you approach the obstacle with your non-preferred foot forward and bring that preferred foot back round to the front at the same time as giving a gentle tug on the bars. That'll generate speed at the same time as lofting that front wheel. And then, once the front wheel touches down, exactly the same as before, pick that rear wheel up, unweight it, and allow it to follow you through. The third technique is the monohop. This is the preferred technique for when you've got a lot of speed and you want to maintain that speed and don't want to have to slow down to ride over the obstacle. Now the monohop is quite an advanced technique. It's different to the bunny hop. A bunny hop is when the rider picks up their front and rear wheels simultaneously, and that's no good for clearing an obstacle such as this. A monohop, on the other hand, is where you loft your front wheel and then your rear wheel into the air. This allows you to cover a much greater distance as well as getting over higher obstacles than a simple bunny hop would allow you. The first step in your monohop is to preload the bike. Crouch down low over the bike and compress the bike suspension in preparation of springing up. The second step is to lift that front wheel. Snap your hips back at the same time as springing up out of that preload and pulling up on the bars. This should get your front wheel nice and high. The third step is to pick your rear wheel up. Now this is where it gets a bit trickier and you have to involve your upper body. Roll your wrists forward and away from you at the same time as scooping up with your feet, pulling up on the pedals. This will coax your rear wheel into the air. The fourth step is all about the landing. Now you've got the bike in the air and you've got that rear wheel up nice and high, you need to be prepared to soak up that landing. Try and land with both front and rear wheels at the same time. This will give you the most control as well as the smoothest landing. The most important thing is to be confident with your monohop and to get your timing right. You need to loft that front wheel nice and high, because if you don't, there's a risk of planting it into the front side of the obstacle. If your rear wheel doesn't quite clear the obstacle, don't panic. As long as you're carrying sufficient pace and you've got that front wheel nice and high, your rear wheel should still be able to clear the obstacle pretty easily, even if it tags it on the way through.
You're working too hard. I see your dressings and I gave you my heart. Slow down, you're moving too fast. I have an answers for the questions you ask. Oh baby, out there, honey, you're really gone.
The third technique that we're going to talk about involves manualing into the face of the obstacle. Now this isn't something you're always going to do, but it's perfect for if the obstacle catches you by surprise or you're not so confident with your monohop, or if you're travelling at high speed and want to maintain that momentum without having to do a monohop. For this technique, all you need to do is pull a manual before the face of the obstacle. Snap your hips backward, tug up on the bars, and get prepared for that rear wheel to plough into the obstacle. So you need to make sure you've got sufficient weight over the rear of the bike. If you have your weight too far forward, you're going to get pitched forward when your rear wheel has that impact. Compared to previous techniques where you have to throw your weight forward to help that rear wheel through, you don't want to do this with this technique. You want to make sure that your weight stays over the back of the bike the whole way through the impact with the obstacle. This way, when your rear wheel hits the obstacle, you're not going to get pitched forward. It's all about defense, and making sure you do this will stop you from getting thrown over the bars.
Thank you for watching Australian Mountain Bike Magazine's How To Volume 2.
And a big thanks to all our sponsors, Clarence Street Cyclery, Trek Bicycles and Bontrager for making this film possible. But most importantly, a huge thank you to all the readers out there for the ongoing support. We really hope that you got something out of this DVD to help you enjoy your riding even more. Hopefully see you out there.
I like small speakers, I like tall speakers, and ever music, they're wired for sound. Walking along with my head full of music, set in my pocket and I'm gonna use it. Stereo, out in the street, you know. Oh, 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 oh. Jump in my car, go to work and cruising. I'll never think that I'll blow all my fuses. Traffic flows into the street, you know. Oh, oh,